I'm a university archivist. I found a collection of recordings that document something impossible. I need to write this down while I still can. My hands are shaking. I haven't slept properly in 4 days, and I'm not sure if I'm being paranoid or if I should be more afraid than I already am. I'm a university archivist, have been for 8 years, and I thought I'd seen every kind of weird donation that could come through our doors. People leave us their grandparents' war letters, their old photo albums, sometimes just boxes of random junk they couldn't be bothered to sort through. My job is to catalog it all, preserve what's valuable, and quietly dispose of what isn't. Last month, I received a donation that I wish had been disposed of before it ever reached me. The box came from the estate of Dr. Martin Cresswell, a psychology professor who taught here from 1978 to 2003. He died in February at 94 years old. According to the paperwork, he'd left specific instructions in his will that all his research materials were to be donated to the university archives exactly 6 months after his death. Not immediately, exactly 6 months. At the time, I thought that was a little odd, but estate stuff can be complicated. Sometimes there are tax reasons or family members who need time to go through things first. The collection arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in August. I remember because I'd brought leftover pizza for lunch and was annoyed that I had to interrupt eating it to sign for the delivery. 3 large archival boxes, professionally packed, with a manila envelope taped to the top labeled, "Cataloging Instructions," read first. I opened the envelope and found a typed letter on Dr. Cresswell's personal letterhead, dated January 15, 2024, about a month before he died. His handwriting was still steady, no tremor. The letter read, "To the archivist processing this collection, you will find my research materials organized chronologically across 3 boxes. This represents my life's work studying pattern recognition and memory consolidation in longitudinal subjects. The recordings are the primary research data. The notebooks contain my analysis. Under no circumstances should you attempt to contact any of the research subjects or their families. Most are deceased. Those who aren't have the right to privacy. Complete your cataloging work, assign an access restriction of 50 years, and move on with your life. Do not listen to all of the recordings. Do not attempt to verify the contents. Do not discuss this collection with anyone outside of official archival processing. These instructions will seem strange to you. In 6 months, they will seem wise. MC. I've been doing this job long enough that weird instructions from deceased donors don't surprise me anymore. Academics can be eccentric, especially near the end of their lives. They worry about their legacy, about privacy, about competitors stealing their work. I figured Dr. Cresswell had done some controversial research, maybe something that wouldn't meet today's ethics standards, and wanted it restricted until everyone involved was long dead. I set the letter aside and opened the first box. Inside were 23 cassette tapes in labeled cases, along with 3 spiral-bound notebooks. The tapes were numbered sequentially. Subject A. Session 1 inch through Subject A. Session 23. The dates on the labels ran from March 1979 to October 2001. 22 years of recordings of the same person. The notebooks were filled with handwritten observations in Dr. Cresswell's neat, precise script. I flipped through the first one. It contained dated entries corresponding to the recordings, with notes about response patterns, recognition accuracy, and memory consolidation intervals. Standard psychology research stuff, as far as I could tell. The second box contained recordings and notes for Subject B, 19 tapes spanning 1980 to 1999. The third box had Subject C, 16 tapes from 1982 to 1998. My first thought was that this was going to be a straightforward processing job. Describe the collection, note the date range, assign the access restriction, done. Maybe a week of work, tops. But I'm thorough. Part of good archival practice is spot-checking materials to make sure the labels are accurate and the content is what it claims to be. So I pulled out Subject A, Session 1, dug our old cassette player out of storage, and pressed play. The tape hissed for a moment. Then Dr. Cresswell's voice came through, younger but recognizable from the faculty lectures I'd heard him give before his retirement. March 14, 1979. Initial interview with Subject A. Subject is a 32-year-old male, unmarried, employed as an accountant. No history of mental illness. No prior participation in psychological studies. Subject has been informed this is a long-term study on memory and pattern recognition. Compensation is $50 per session, with sessions occurring approximately once per month. Subject has signed all consent forms. There was a pause, some rustling, then another voice, male, younger, slightly nervous. Can you hear me okay? Yes, that's fine. Let's begin. I'm going to show you a series of images, and I want you to tell me what you see. What followed was about 40 minutes of standard psychology test procedures. Dr. Cresswell showed the subject inkblots, geometric patterns, ambiguous images. The subject described what he saw. His name was never mentioned. Dr. Cresswell asked questions about the subject's dreams, his childhood memories, whether he'd ever experienced déjà vu. It was boring, clinical, exactly what you'd expect from a psychology study in 1979. I fast-forwarded through the last 10 minutes to make sure the recording quality stayed consistent, then moved on to spot-checking a few other tapes. Session 5, from August 1979. Session 12, from March 1981. Session 18, from June 1994. They all followed the same basic pattern. Subject A came in. Dr. Cresswell showed him images or asked him questions. They discussed his responses. The subject's voice aged over the years, deeper, more tired, a little rougher. But the format never changed. I was about to put the tapes back and move on to writing up the collection description when something made me pull out the final tape. Subject A. Session 23. October 17, 2001. The tape started the same way as all the others. October 17, 2001. Session 23 with Subject A. Subject is now 54 years old. Still employed, though he reports increased stress at work following recent events. That would have been right after 9/11, I realized. A month after. Dr. Cresswell continued. Subject reports increased frequency of the dreams we've been tracking. He states they've become more vivid and more specific in the past 6 weeks. They're not just dreams, Subject A said. His voice sounded strained. I keep telling you, they're not just dreams. I'm seeing things that haven't happened yet. Tell me about the most recent one. Last night, I saw Jesus. This is going to sound insane. We've been doing this for 22 years. You can tell me. Subject A took a deep breath. I saw the building where I work. The office on the 14th floor. But everything was different. The computers were different, thinner, flat screens, not like anything that exists now. The phones were different. No one had desk phones anymore. Everyone had these small devices, like the size of a calculator but thinner. They were touching screens, swiping their fingers across them. What else? The calendar on the wall said March 2016. I felt a chill run down my spine. The tape was from 2001, 15 years before 2016. And what happened in this dream? Dr. Cresswell asked. I was standing at the window, looking out at the city. And I could see that the skyline was different. There was construction where the towers used to be. A new building, taller, with a spire. And I knew, I don't know how, but I knew, that it had been 14.5 years since they fell. I could feel it, the weight of all that time. Did you see anything else? Any other specific details? The TV in the break room. It was on the news. The headline said something about an election. I couldn't make out all the words, but I saw Trump, and I thought that was weird because Donald Trump isn't a politician. He's just that guy from the casino bankruptcies and that reality show. But in the dream, it was like everyone took it seriously. I stopped the tape. My hands had gone cold. Subject A had described the One World Trade Center, which wasn't completed until 2014. He'd described smartphones, which didn't exist in 2001. He'd described the 2016 election, 15 years before it happened, and specifically mentioned Trump, who at that time was just a businessman and reality TV host, not a political figure. This had to be a hoax. Someone had doctored the tape, overdubbed it, something. But the audio quality was consistent. There were no obvious splice marks. The tape itself was clearly old, the case was yellowed, the label faded. I pulled out Dr. Cresswell's notebook and found the entry for October 17, 2001. Session 23. A continues to report precognitive experiences with increasing specificity and accuracy. Today's session particularly notable. A described technological and architectural details consistent with my own projections for 15 to 20 years in the future. Described flat-screen computing devices, touchscreen interfaces, specific architectural reconstruction in Manhattan. Most disturbing. Referenced political scenario that seems improbable but not impossible. A appeared distressed. Reports disruption to sleep, difficulty maintaining normal social relationships. Have recommended he continue avoiding discussing these experiences with others outside our sessions. Compensation increased to $200 per session to maintain cooperation. A remains our most reliable subject. I sat there for a long time, staring at the notebook. Then I did what Dr. Cresswell had specifically told me not to do. I pulled out my laptop and started searching for Subject A. Dr. Cresswell's research protocols meant no names were used in the recordings, but he was required by university policy to keep consent forms. Those forms would be in the administrative files. I logged into our database and pulled up Dr. Cresswell's old research records. It took me 40 minutes, but I found it. A consent form dated March 14, 1979, signed by someone named Robert T. Hamill. Age 32. Occupation: accountant. Address listed in Philadelphia. I searched for Robert T. Hamill online. The first result was an obituary from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Robert Timothy Hamill died November 3, 2001. Age 54. Survived by a sister in Boston. Cause of death: suicide. He'd shot himself in his apartment 17 days after that last recorded session with Dr. Cresswell. I started looking through the other boxes. Subject B, first session, April 1980. Female, age 27, elementary school teacher. 22 years of recordings. The final session was dated March 15, 1999. I found her consent form. Patricia Levine. Obituary: Patricia Ann Levine, died April 2, 1999. Age 46. Cause of death: drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the day. Police ruled it a suicide. Subject C, first session, February 1982. Male, age 23, graduate student. 16 years of recordings. Final session, August 12, 1998. James Morrow. Obituary dated September 1998. Jumped from his apartment balcony. All three subjects had killed themselves within weeks of their final sessions with Dr. Cresswell. I should have stopped. I should have followed Dr. Cresswell's instructions, finished the cataloging, and walked away. But I couldn't. I spent the rest of that Tuesday evening and all of Wednesday listening to more tapes, reading more notebook entries, trying to understand what I'd found. The pattern was consistent across all three subjects. Early sessions were standard psychology testing. But around session 5 or 6, each subject started reporting vivid dreams that contained details about the future. Not vague predictions, specific, verifiable details. Subject B, in a session from 1987, described seeing a wall coming down, and people celebrating in Germany, in Berlin, at a gate. This was in June 1987. The Berlin Wall fell in November 1989. Subject C, in 1991, described dreaming about a war in the desert, where everything is filmed, and we watch it on TV like it's a video game, and there are smart bombs that have cameras in them. The Gulf War, described months before it happened. But the predictions got more disturbing as the years went on. In a session from 1994, subject A described dreams where everyone carries a computer in their pocket, and people stop talking to each other in person, they just look at screens all the time. He described social media, drone warfare, the surveillance state. Things that didn't exist yet but were beginning to take shape. Dr. Cresswell's notebooks documented all of this with clinical precision. He tracked accuracy rates. He noted when subjects' predictions came true and when they didn't. He developed a rating system: verified, partially verified, unverifiable, falsified. The verification rate was over 70%. But here's what really got to me. The subjects weren't predicting random events. They were seeing their own futures. Subject A saw his office building in 2016. But he killed himself in 2001. He never made it to 2016. Subject B described, in a session from 1997, attending her daughter's college graduation in 2004. But she died in 1999. Subject C, in his final session, described in detail a vacation he would take with his wife to Japan in 2005. He wasn't married at the time. He died in 1998. They were seeing futures they would never live to experience. Dr. Cresswell's notes from the later sessions showed he was aware of this. In March 1999, a few weeks before Subject B's death, he wrote, B continues to report increasingly vivid precognitive experiences of her own future. She describes events from 2002, 2005, 2008, years she is now unlikely to reach. Her psychological state has deteriorated significantly. She reports feeling trapped in the wrong timeline and like I'm supposed to be someone else. Have increased monitoring protocols. Am concerned about. The entry ended there. The next entry was dated April 8, 1999, 6 days after subject B's death. B is deceased. I should have seen it coming. The pattern is clear now. The subjects aren't experiencing precognition. They're experiencing memories from an alternate timeline where they didn't participate in this study. Each session appears to strengthen the connection, allowing more vivid and specific recall. But this creates an unbearable cognitive dissonance. They remember futures they will never have because the act of participating in this study has altered their timeline. The more they remember, the more they understand what they've lost. I am causing this. I am killing them with knowledge of lives they should have lived. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the notebook. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of elaborate fiction, a creative writing project, something. But the tapes were real. The subjects were real. I'd found their obituaries. Dr. Cresswell was real. The university had records of his research. I checked the time. It was past midnight. I'd been in the archives for almost 14 hours. I packed up the boxes, locked the archives, and went home. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed thinking about Robert Hamill, Patricia Levine, and James Morrow. 3 people who'd agreed to participate in a simple psychology study and ended up killing themselves because they remembered living different lives. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't face going back to those boxes yet. But I couldn't stop thinking about them either. I started researching Dr. Cresswell's background. He'd published extensively in the 1960s and early 1970s, standard academic work on memory, pattern recognition, cognitive psychology. Nothing controversial. Then, after 1978, his publication record essentially stopped. A few minor articles, conference presentations, but nothing substantial. All of his time, apparently, had gone into this secret longitudinal study. He'd been married once, divorced in 1985. No children. After he retired in 2003, he lived quietly in a small house near campus. Colleagues described him as withdrawn, intensely private. One former student I found on LinkedIn said Dr. Cresswell had become obsessed with the idea that consciousness operates across multiple timelines simultaneously. On Friday, I forced myself to go back to the archives. I pulled out the notebooks again and started reading more carefully. In the later entries, Dr. Cresswell began documenting his own experiences. November 2000. I've started having the dreams too. I see myself in a timeline where I never began this research. I'm still married to Sarah. We have a daughter, Emily, who is 15 years old. I am happy. I am a mediocre researcher with a mediocre career, but I am happy. Every night, I dream of this life I didn't choose. Every morning, I wake up alone in this timeline, having destroyed 3 people's lives in pursuit of understanding something that should never have been understood. Later entries got darker. I can't continue recruiting subjects. I know what happens now. They start remembering alternate versions of themselves, versions that never participated in this study. Those alternate selves live longer, happier lives. The subjects become aware that they've traded their best possible futures for $50 per session and participation in a study that doesn't even benefit them. The cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable. They kill themselves. I've killed 3 people. I will kill anyone else I recruit. Why can't I stop? Because I need to understand. Because the implications are staggering. We live in one timeline, but we're quantum entangled with alternate versions of ourselves in others. The study creates the divergence point. The subjects' alternate selves, the ones who never participated, continue forward in their timelines. But somehow, the connection remains. Memories leak across. The subjects in this timeline receive memories from their alternate selves, and it destroys them. I've begun to understand why. It's not just that they remember better lives. It's that they remember being observed. In their alternate timelines, someone is still watching them. They don't participate in my study, but something else, someone else, is documenting them. They can feel it. Subject A told me in session 19 that he dreamed of being in a file somewhere, being watched even though the study never happened. I don't understand how this is possible. The observation shouldn't exist in timelines where the study never occurred. Unless that entry ended there. The final entry in the last notebook was dated August 2002. I'm an old man. I'll die soon. Probably in the next 20 years if I'm lucky. I've arranged for these materials to be donated to the university archives 6 months after my death. By then, everyone involved will be gone. No one can be hurt anymore. But someone needs to know what I discovered. Someone needs to understand that consciousness is not bound to a single timeline. We are living one life, but we are entangled with every other version of ourselves making different choices. Usually, the connection is weak enough that we don't notice. But if you create a strong enough divergence point, if you make someone's life different enough from what it would have been, the connection becomes conscious. They start to remember, and they can't bear the weight of knowing what they lost. I'm writing this to whoever processes this collection. You've read this far, which means you ignored my instructions. You've probably started researching the subjects. You've found their obituaries. You know what happened to them. And now you're wondering, what about you? What timeline did you deviate from when you decided to keep reading instead of following my instructions? What version of you, in an alternate timeline, stopped reading after the first tape? What is that version of you doing right now that you'll never get to do? The difference is, you weren't part of the study. You're just reading about it. The effect is much weaker. You might have strange dreams over the next few months. You might occasionally feel like you've lived through a day before, or like you're supposed to be somewhere else. But it will fade, unless you keep engaging with this material, unless you become obsessed with understanding, the way I did. I'm asking you, begging you, to stop. Process the collection. Restrict access for 50 years. Move on with your life. Don't try to replicate the study. Don't try to verify the precognitive elements. Don't go looking for my alternate selves in other timelines. The knowledge is poison. It killed my subjects. It destroyed my life. It will destroy yours too if you let it. In another timeline, I made different choices. I never started this research. I stayed married. I had a daughter. I was happy. That version of me doesn't know that this version exists. He doesn't know that his life only happened because I sacrificed mine. Sometimes I dream about him, and I hate him for living the life I should have had. But mostly I envy him. Because he doesn't know. He doesn't carry the weight of all these other timelines. He just lives. Stop reading. Close the notebooks. Finish your cataloging. Choose to be the version of yourself who doesn't know. That was the last entry. I closed the notebook. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Outside the archives, I could hear students walking past, laughing, complaining about exams. Normal university sounds. Normal life. I should have followed his instructions. I knew that, but I'd already read too much. I already knew. That night, I had my first dream. I was in the archives, but it was different. Cleaner, better lit, with modern equipment I didn't recognize. I was cataloging a collection of digital files, not cassette tapes. I'd never heard of Dr. Martin Cresswell. In the dream, I felt content. Uncurious. I processed collections, went home, lived my life. I didn't stay late wondering about mysteries. I didn't lose sleep over disturbing discoveries. When I woke up Saturday morning, I felt certain, absolutely certain, that the dream was a memory from a version of me that had stopped reading after the first tape. I know what Dr. Cresswell would say about this. He'd say the knowledge has created a divergence point. He'd say I'm now entangled with an alternate version of myself who made a different choice. He'd say the dreams will get stronger and more specific until I can't tell which timeline is real anymore. I know what I should do. I should finish the cataloging, apply the 50-year restriction, and never think about this collection again. I should choose not to become obsessed. I should choose to be the version of myself who lives a normal, happy life instead of the version who destroys herself trying to understand something that can't be understood. But here's the thing. I've already made my choice. I'm already that person. The version of me who stopped reading doesn't exist anymore, except as a memory of what I could have been. Last night, Thursday night, 4 days after I first listened to those tapes, I had another dream. I was sitting in this same apartment, but 20 years older. My hands were wrinkled, my hair was gray. I was alone. I'd spent 20 years researching Dr. Cresswell's work, trying to understand what he'd discovered. I'd never married, never had children, never pursued any of the other things I'd once wanted from life. I'd given everything to understanding the mechanics of consciousness across timelines. And in the dream, I absolutely knew, that this was my future. Not a possible future, not a potential timeline, my actual, inevitable future. Because I'd already made the choices that led there. I'd already become the person who couldn't let go. When I woke up this morning, I wasn't sure if the dream was a memory from an alternate timeline or a precognition of this one. Maybe there's no difference. Maybe all timelines eventually converge on the same essential truth. Some people are constitutionally unable to leave mysteries alone, even when unraveling them destroys everything else in their lives. Dr. Cresswell killed 3 people by showing them the lives they could have lived. But I think he got it wrong about one thing. It's not the knowledge that kills you. It's realizing that you were always going to be the person who chose knowledge over happiness. You were always going to be the version of yourself who kept reading, kept researching, kept diving deeper into things that should have been left alone. The subjects didn't kill themselves because they learned about better timelines. They killed themselves because they realized they were always going to be the people who made the wrong choice. The choice to participate in the study. The choice to keep coming back, session after session, even as the dreams got worse. They were always going to be the versions of themselves who sacrificed their best possible futures out of curiosity about what a psychology professor was studying. I'm finishing the cataloging today. I'm applying the 50-year access restriction. I'm following Dr. Cresswell's instructions. But it's too late for me to be the version of myself who never opened those boxes in the first place. I keep wondering, in how many other timelines am I sitting in these archives right now? How many versions of me stopped reading after the first tape, after the first notebook, after the first disturbing discovery? How many versions walked away and lived normal, happy lives? And in how many timelines am I just like Dr. Cresswell, recruiting my own subjects, creating my own divergence points, documenting the slow disintegration of people who can't bear the weight of knowing they're living the wrong life? I don't know why I'm posting this. Maybe because Dr. Cresswell was right that someone needs to know what he discovered. Maybe because I need to document this while I still can. Maybe because in some other timeline, you'll read this and make a different choice than I did. If you work in archives or research libraries or any job where you process collections from deceased academics, if you ever receive a donation with instructions not to examine the contents too closely, please, just follow the instructions. Don't do what I did. Don't become the version of yourself who has to live with knowing. Edit. 6 hours later, I just got a call from the university's research compliance office. Apparently, Dr. Cresswell's estate attorney contacted them. There's a second set of instructions I was supposed to receive, but there was a delay in the estate processing. The attorney is coming Monday morning to discuss additional restrictions on the collection. I asked what kind of restrictions. She said she wasn't authorized to discuss it over the phone, but that it was crucial I don't discuss the collection contents with anyone before Monday. I'm not sure what to make of this. I'm not sure it matters. I've already read everything. I already know. Or do I? What if the really important material wasn't in the 3 boxes I received? What if there's a 4th box I haven't seen yet? Edit 2. 11:37 p.m. Asterisk. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Dr. Cresswell's last notebook entry. The part where he wrote about someone else documenting them, in timelines where his study never occurred. What did he mean by that? I pulled out the notebooks again. I've been rereading his entries from 2001-2002. There are details I missed before. References to parallel observation and independent verification across timelines. Mentions of the others who were conducting similar research. He wasn't working alone. There were other researchers studying the same phenomenon. Maybe at other universities. Maybe in other countries. Maybe in other timelines. What if Dr. Cresswell's study wasn't the divergence point? What if it was just one observation protocol among many, all studying the same subjects across multiple timelines? What if we're all being studied right now, and we just don't know it yet? I need to stop writing. I need to stop thinking about this. But I can't, because I just realized something else. Dr. Cresswell's donation came with specific instructions to restrict access for 50 years. But he also ensured the collection would arrive at the archives exactly 6 months after his death. He wanted someone to